creator of Sunseed The Journey, and today's host, Amritat Cohen.
Hello, everybody. Welcome again to the Sunseed Wisdom Talks. I'm Amritat Cohen, the director of the movie Sunseed The Journey, and your host for today. This is actually a special edition of our Sunseed Wisdom Talks. We are going to celebrate the beginning of a new movie getting ready to come out, the sequel to Sunseed, called Sunflower. Many of you were with us 3 days ago for the kickoff of our official crowdfunding campaign to help us get the foundation money to do this new movie. Many people have been asking, what became of the disciples and the followers of the teachers of yesteryear? So this is the focus of the new film and much more. How would you like to see today's wisest men and women and the teachings of the modern masters? If so, you're going to love this new movie we're about to make, but it can only happen with your help and support. This is why we started the Sunflower crowdfunding drive. The title of the movie is Sunflower because people want to know what happened to the seeds, and these are the flowers that have come. To help us out, to contribute so we can have this movie put into motion, is to go to our website. We've created a special crowdfunding website. You can give a small amount or a large amount, whatever, to help us with our journey. It's sunflowerthefilm.com. I think it's here on the screen. Write it down because you don't want to miss what's coming next. But please, before the end of the day, go there, take a look and see if you can help us get forward. Also, I just want to remind our audience that you can see all of our past Wisdom Talks by going to our Wisdom Talk website. It's also playing on YouTube and Facebook, but our website, where you can see all the past dozen Wisdom Talks.
So if you wanted to tune in upstairs, in case you did, just
www.sunseed.org. And today we have the joy, really, of spending an hour or more with a fantastic, inspiring couple. And this couple was actually with us for our jamboree 3 days ago to do the kickoff of the crowdfunding. They're going to share some great inspiration and wisdom with us today. I'll bring them in a minute after I tell their biographies, but it's Pir Shabda Kahn and his wife Tamam Khan. Tamam is a poet, a lecturer, an author, and she has written 2 amazing books about the great women in history that are not that well known, actually. There hasn't been a lot written about them. So these are amazing books in the family of Prophet Muhammad. The first book is called Untold, A History of the Wives of Prophet Muhammad, which actually won the International Book Award. And the other book is Fatima's Touch, Poems and Stories of the Prophet's Daughter. So I urge you to take a look at very, very wonderful books. Pir Shabda Kahn is the spiritual leader of the Sufi Ruhaniyat, which covers more than 50 countries today. It's the legacy of Murshid Samuel Lewis, who is in our movie known as Sufi Sam. And he's an international lecturer and teacher of inner retreats focusing on the esoteric practices of the great world traditions. He's also part of an influential group of peacemakers. He's an avid student of mysticism and sound and music, and a teacher and performer of the Hindustani classical vocal music, ragas. So now I'm going to bring in our guests. Thank you so much, Tamam and Pir Shabda. Welcome to this edition of Wisdom Talks.
Greetings and salutations, Amritat, and to all the viewers. And we're going to have a lot to live up to, according to what the things you've just said.
Well, it's easy for you. You do it. And more, actually. Shub and I have been friends a long time, going back into the days when we were filming the movie Sunseed, The Journey, back in 1969.
52 years, yeah.
It goes very fast. Would you mind? I know you don't mind. Would you please share with us some music or wisdom to settle us down and open our hearts?
Yeah. So, with your permission, dear viewers, we'd like to recite the invocation which we use at the beginning of activities together, and it goes like this: toward the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. I mean, so I believe we're going to be speaking a lot about the dances of universal peace, the form that came through my teacher, Merced Samuel Lewis. And there's over 1,000 melodies and dances by now. And we have a very extraordinary website. We'll talk about all that. But this is one of the more recent dances by one of our younger composers. It uses the words Ishq, Allah, Mabud Lela. So it says Ishq, love. If in English you have to say the essence, God is love. God plays the part of the lover and the part of the beloved. There's not lover and beloved are not a real thing. They're a veil. In the end, there's only one, but God is playing all the parts. And then we say La ilaha illallahu. Nothing exists but God. It's a very snappy little tune. Ishq Ooh, I mean,
Wow.
to Mom. And, here we are on Zoom, which is just so, or whatever, online, we're have this extraordinary ability to reach across physical boundaries and be with people in different lands and countries and languages. And, but if we'd be in a dance circle now, there'd be all musicians would come into the middle, and we'd have another guitarist, and then maybe a bass player and a drummer and a violinist and a flautist and a bassoon player, or we'd have this a makeshift band, and the band, whoever shows up that day, that's the band. And it's such a universal language we play together. So luckily there's two of us, so I don't have to sing alone. But what we're really much more used to is having a whole group, and then having all of you singing live. So this is a little part of what really happens when we're together.
Do you want to do another one?
Let's do since we are going to be speaking about Merced Sam Lewis, this is probably the signature dance. For the first 10 or 20 years, it was always the last dance that we would do. Most of the viewers will know it. It's called we call it the Kalama dance. In Islam, the Kalama means to recite La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, or La ilaha illallahu Muhammadur Rasulullah. So La ilaha Be sure you're singing with us. La ilaha Just before I set this down, many people ask, what am I playing? And this is called a bouzouki. This one is from Turkey. The Turks claim it and the Greeks claim it. I'm sure they're both right. So, okay. Thank you, Tamam.
Welcome.
Tamam Shabda, thank you both. Really, this brings back so many memories, Shabda, for me, Pir Shabda, because I was part of the dance, and the beautiful thing about the dances of universal peace, which we called in those days Sufi dancing, was that this was a chant in basically using the Arabic, but then we would do a chant using Hebrew phrases. We would do a chant using biblical phrases. We would do a chant using Buddhist and Hindu phrases. And so the whole idea was to really to celebrate the truth of all the great world religions while we were looking in each other's eyes, which also is another sort of transmission, and while we were in a group feeling the group energy. So I want to talk a little bit about your history, how you got to where you are, but since we're on the dance, why don't you explain a little bit about sort of the hidden power of doing these dances and what people get out of them?
Yeah, thank you. And feel it's a great opportunity. And there's no question for me that there is a universality of human ideals, that loving kindness and compassion is the activity of our true nature, and it should be the root activity of everything we all manifest. And around that, great beings have become illuminated, and the pinnacle of those beings have arisen, at least the ones we know, as prophets, and prophets which later became world religions. And naturally, for us, when we know something is good, or it's the way we've been taught, or it's the way we've grown up, and we're unaware of other ways, we're unaware that same universal message of loving kindness and compassion is what the other prophet and so the Jewish tradition, the Muslim tradition, the Christian tradition, the Hindu tradition, and not only that, but the gardening tradition and the music tradition and with all the different vehicles, there's a universality of religious ideals. But within the traditions of the great beings who brought these messages, they gave us practices to do to awaken, to awaken loving kindness and compassion. And in many cases, those are the sacred phrases of the world, or what we would call the sacred language of the world. And most of us are very familiar with the idea of mantra yoga from Sanskrit and the derivative languages from Sanskrit, in Arabic, in Hebrew, then Latin and Greek, and so on and so forth. And then naturally, later we want to have something in the language that our tongue is used to. So in my case, English, but if you're in Germany, in German, and so on and so forth. So for the Sufi is the path of mysticism. It's the path of direct experience. And it's not so concerned with what kind of car you drove to get to the destination. So it's not identified by the Christian car or the Buddhist car or the Jewish car, but it's more interested in awakening to your true nature, to loving kindness. And so outwardly, it becomes our opportunity to share that we can recite in a genuine way, Om Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Om Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram, in Sanskrit, the great mantra, or in Hebrew, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, or the hundreds of great sacred phrases, and so on, or in Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Hallelujah, and so on and so forth. Omani Pemi Hung, Omani Pemi Hung, Omani Pemi Hung. So those aren't different destinations. They're different kinds of cars. And so that's already been part of our Sufi message as it unfolded, as it came from India in our case. So there's Sufis all over the world. I mean, you may all be unaware of this, but I have a colleague who's has a similar post to me in Nigeria. He's the head, they call it Caliph. I use a different word than Pir, but he's the Khalifa for the Tijaniya Sufis in Nigeria. So our family has, I don't know, 4,000, 3,000, 5,000 people. So I asked Abul Fati is his name, Khalifa, I call him Khalifa. Khalifa, how many people are under your care? And he said, without a beat, about 20 million. In Nigeria. Oh, so something's happening in Ghana and Senegal. That's just a part of the world you probably are not aware of, Senegal, Ghana. Or then there's so many different kinds of Sufis in Morocco, in the Middle East. And Sufi is said to have begun with the first person who awakened, and it's a lineage which is passed on. The word Sufi didn't get coined till the 10th century. And nobody knows its derivation. There's only guesses. The Sophia, Suf, which is the rough wool that the mystics wore, the fakirs wore, or Safa, which means purity in Arabic. So those are some of the potentials. So we're happy to be called Sufi, but certainly that's misunderstood. But if we didn't use the word Sufi, then who knows what we would be called. So now it's 1968. Let me go a little further. Sorry. Hazrat Inayat Khan, a great classical Indian musician and Sufi, Sufi master, if you'd like to call him that. He's in his 20s, and his teacher, Sayyid Abu Hashim Madani, in Hyderabad, where he was studying, said to him, "You need to go to the West to spread this flower of Sufism through the harmony of your music." He was a musician, and for which you're so greatly gifted. And so he came to plant the seeds. In the first place he came was San Francisco. So I live in the Bay Area. And then traveled all over America, and then went to Europe and planted his message all over Europe, traveled in many of the European countries, traveled in Russia, and so on. So a young man named Samuel Lewis, American-born, San Francisco Jewish man, became a disciple of Hazrat Inayat Khan in the 20s. That lineage comes to me, or many, many of us. I don't mean it in a personal way, but comes to us. And so my teacher, Samuel Lewis, or we call him Murshid, which is the one who shows the way. That's what it means. So Murshid Samuel Lewis not only studied and practiced Sufi or Sufism, he spent 50 years in Zen. He had a great Hindu master named Papa Ramdas, so studied the Indian mysteries, studied Kabbalah, studied the Christian mysteries. And so when we met him, he was toward the end of his life, in his 60s, and it was kind of a flowering of his being. His late 60s, excuse me, no, he was in his 70s. I'm wrong about that. It was in the 60s, and he was in his 70s. And so it was like everything that was rich had come to, It's like the bread had risen or the flowers were blooming, and he planted those seeds in our hearts, which are still, those seeds are still taking root and blooming. So now, in 1968, he already had, I was not with him yet, but he already had a few young disciples. I should say a little bit earlier, and I think it was in 67, but it could have been in early 68. He said he landed up in the hospital. We found out later that it was due to some heart conditions. And he said, I was flat on my back, and Allah came to me and said, I make you spiritual leader of the hippies. And he said, I couldn't argue because I was flat on my back. I had no strength to argue. And that's really what happened. We were the hippies, and for me, that term is a sacred phrase, not a derogative phrase. And we came around him. And there he was teaching us the universality, teaching us through the universality of religious ideals. We didn't feel like we were learning to be Muslim or Jewish or Christian. We felt we were learning to be Muslim and Jewish and Christian and Buddhist. We were learning all of it. It was an and, not an or it wasn't none of the above. It was all of the above. And so then he started having visions of people holding hands and chanting and singing together the names of God, like mantra yoga, zikr, wazifa, and so on. And then one day he said, let's go downstairs. So this was in his home called the Mentor Garden. Some of you I know have been there. It's in Presita Park. Still there. We own it now. It's in San Francisco. And at that time, the downstairs was a 2-car garage that had, where you'd park 2 cars in a row. So it was long and narrow, not 2 cars like this. And it was a concrete floor. The walls they were just framed. There was no stucco or anything. There was 2 oil stains where cars would sit. Those days, cars all leaked some oil. And, 10, 15 people down there. And he said, okay, everybody hold hands. Let's try this. And Allah, 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 Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Allah, like that. And one dance became 2 and 2 became 4. And while he was still alive, he said to us that this form which we're receiving is a gift from God, and that it's for the world. And he said, this, after I pass, this is going to spread exponentially. That's been the case. So when he died, it was 1971, January 15th. So we were, I think, under 160 disciples of his. We had a regular, at that point, Wednesday night meeting at the Sausalito Art Center, and like 150 people would come. And, there was no microphones then and sound systems, all the things we have now. And it was very, very magnetic. So that was how these dances began. So I know it'd be nicer to have more of a dialogue. So I'll pause here and see where you'd like to go.
Well, it's so wonderful, the history and what's come out of it for the dances. Just to remind the audience, you can see the dances in the movie Sunseed: The Journey. We have captured Murshid Sam teaching the dances and some of the dances. Ishkalam Abudlala that they were singing before. You'll see people dancing with their heads together, couples. So please go to sunseed.org and see the movie if you haven't. But more importantly, again, I want to tell you that what we're hearing from Shabda, and we're going to hear from so many of the people who were alive in that day, if God willing, we can get to everybody in the next few years. They're getting on in their years with your help. Really, from the bottom of my heart, I ask your help so that we can make this new movie Sunflower blossom by going to our website, sunflowerthefilm.com. Enough of that. Shabda, back to you. I just wanted to say a question which I've always wanted to ask is that the because I was part of the group. I went into that meeting as not knowing what I was going to find, and came back every week to do the dance. And eventually Murshid Sam actually made me his dance secretary. So I would go there once a week. He would dictate dances to me that I would write down for posterity. But Hazrat Inayat Khan's teaching is so amazing. And he would talk about that there's basically one great spirit in the world, and many different messengers have come from time to time to deliver the message to the people of that time, of that culture, of that era. And these are the prophets and the saints that we know about. What about today? Is there some people are still waiting for the Messiah. Some people are waiting for some catastrophic event to happen to change the world. But do you think there's still room for more prophets to come and start new religions, or to speak the message of today?
Yeah, thank you. I have no idea if there's going to be new prophets but I know from my experience, or I feel from my experience, everything is within you. Everything is within you, within me. The essence is within me. And, I so appreciate, like all of you, the great poet and master Jalaluddin Rumi. He says, whose idea was this anyway? To make the lover so visible and the beloved so hidden. So if I said to you, where's the altar of God? I think you'd have to give one of two answers. One is to say within you, or the other would be to say everywhere. So I certainly know that conceptually, or I believe that conceptually, but I also realize that if I look at certain things, so far I haven't had the mastery to see God everywhere. If I look at the dung heap, or the garbage pail, and so on. Anyway, you understand the example. But I feel that when my heart is fully awakened, there won't be any separation. And so I also wanted to say one thing more, which most people wouldn't know, and even most people of their own tradition wouldn't know, that the Prophet Muhammad, when he brought through the Quran, as so to say, receiving it in dictation from the inner world, it says, we sent you, I'm sure I'm not exactly accurate, but it said something like, we sent you 140,000 prophets, and we make no distinction among them. Now, this is different than, if I'm a Muslim, I might fall into the trap thinking like, oh yeah, there were other prophets, but our prophet is the best. Certainly, if I'm Christian, I might feel, oh, Jesus and so on and so forth. Or if I'm a Buddhist tradition, I might be confused and think Buddha is the best. Or I wouldn't know, to be quite honest. So if you can imagine now that there is the essence of all. It says there's a line that says a hadith that says, one of the sayings of Prophet Muhammad, that God says, I was a hidden treasure and I wish to be known. I can explain what that means, but do I really understand it? Absolutely not. But essence of you, essence of me, essence of everyone is that which we call God. It's the livingness in us. And, some of the methods in India called neti, not this, not this, you start to deconstruct what is my essential part. I could tell it like this. We come into this life by going to the car rental service, and we rent these cars called human bodies. And then upon departure, we've got to return the car to the place where we rented it from, which is the earth, water, fire, and air out of this planet. So we're all made out of the same material. The planet's made out of the material. In fact, the galaxy is made out of the same material. The 500 billion galaxies are made out of the same material. But then that material comes around and forms mind and body. Neither mind nor body is essence. They're invigorated by the essence. And so we want to get to know our essence, but then gradually find out that everything that mind and body is made of is also part of the essence, because everything is essential. And so finally, we realize that there is one ocean of being. And what's happened is that parts of the ocean, like it's easy to understand the metaphor of a wave rises up, and now the wave is out, and it thinks, oh, I'm a wave. And then it becomes part of the ocean again. So you could say that us as human beings, we're God confused. We think we're the wave, we're the ocean. And when we think we're the wave, naturally we want to do everything to protect that wave, so we become selfish, where the idea of a self is it's an adapted notion. There is no separate self in reality. It's very easy to prove in words and by example, but it's extraordinarily long journey to awaken to that.
Can we talk about for a moment God confusion? Because that was a very interesting phrase, and you like Murshid Samuel Lewis have studied with teachers of different traditions. You studied with the great Indian musician and teacher Pandit Pranath. You have a Tibetan teacher, the Tai Situ Rinpoche, the 12th one of the great Buddhist teachers in the world today. And just a footnote, by the way, if you have questions, put them in the chat group, because we have this rare opportunity to have someone like Pir Shabda with us, who can actually go into, questions you don't usually hear on talk show radio. But as a Buddhist, the practice is mindfulness, is basically finding some essence beyond the mind in ourselves, call it enlightenment, illumination, whatever that means. And yet the Abrahamic religions, which you grew up in, which is part of the Sufi tradition, postulates there is an eternal being that we call God. and that and those two concepts of individual going beyond the individual and someone that we ask and expect to answer in some form our prayers are not contradictory, but it's a confusion. So maybe you can help enlighten the confusion.
Yeah, maybe. maybe not. Yeah.
I'm sorry to throw that at
No,
you.
no, I'm very happy. I love the question. I love the question.
I've been wanting to ask that question and I would like to ask that question of every spiritual teacher I get to see once we get the movie Sunflower going. Really?
Yes. If let's say all of us together now, you come over to my house and we go on a field trip and we go to the Corte Madera Creek. It's a little stream. And I say to the group, look, here's the Corte Madera Creek. And we look at the water, we see the beautiful trees around it, maybe there's some ducks on it, and so whatever. Yeah. And now I ask you, I say to the group, tell me which part of it is the Corte Madera Creek, or the Mississippi River, or the Rhine River, or whichever we use as an example. Which part of it is the river? Okay, well, we said the water, that there's no noun of water. It's moving. But in fact, the water needs the banks. So it's the water with the banks. Wait, it needs the trees to hold the banks in place. It needs gravity, so it all just doesn't float away. It needs the sun and the moon, so the support for gravity, the warmth of the sun. It's interdependent, and in fact, there's never been a moment that the Corte Madera Creek stood still to be a noun. It's a verb. In fact, through this example, if you meditate on it, you'll see there is no such thing as a noun. There's only verbs. There's only being. There's being in the sense of a verb. And everything that we call thing, in essence, it's interdependent. It doesn't rest on itself. It's not substantial by itself. So there is really no thing. There's a oneness. So that's an outer example. It's philosophical, but that experience is realization, to overcome this adapted notion of a self, of selfishness. Now, how do we arrive at that station? So the different prophets have looked at it different ways. Anaya tells it very beautifully. I put his words up. I'm gonna read them to you because it's very sweet, and it'll be nice to listen to the rhythm of the words of Hazrat Inayat Khan. He says, "The friend who is a friend in life and after death, in pleasure and pain, in riches and poverty, upon one who can always depend, who always guides rightly, who gives the best advice, that friend is hidden in one's own heart. One cannot find a better one. And who is this friend? It's one's own being, our true inner being. This friend is the origin, the source, and the goal of all." But now the question arises, if that friend is one's own being, why call them a friend? Good question. Why not call it oneself? And this is what Lord Buddha came to do. But now here's what Anayat says in his approach. The answer is that no doubt this friend is really one's own being. But when the greater self is compared with our present realization, we find ourselves smaller than the drop in the ocean. We cannot very well call that friend our self until we have forgotten our small self, until we are no longer that small self. Unless we have arrived at that state of perfection, we had better be quiet, not insolent, talking about that which we have yet to become. So what a beautiful way to have permission to practice the path of the lover to the beloved, dear God. So when I say, dear God, I both do it with devotion and a feeling of talking, and also with confusion, because I know which way do I look? Where do I look? Where am I directing my prayers? And so that has to be sorted out day by day by day. And so if we look at Buddhist tradition, Lord Buddha in his teachings really refuted the individual self. And so it's not that we believe in God and the Buddhists don't believe in God. That's completely absurd. Different language and different approach. So that all-pervading essence called Dharma Kaya, the place where the ever-living place called Dharma Kaya. I wrote a letter. This is now, let's see when I have it right here, to His Holiness Dalai Lama. I'd attended, is April 19th, 2006. His Holiness had asked a colleague of ours to bring him together with Muslim leaders. And it was a very extraordinary event. And when His Holiness spoke to those Muslim leaders from around the world, he says, I recognize the beauty and reality of the religion of Islam, and I want to be known as the defender of Islam. So that was very powerful. But there was a place in it where he said, well, we don't really believe in a God. So I wrote him this letter. I'll try to, I hope it's meaningful to you. I wrote, Dearest Ocean, this is April 19th, 2006. Dearest Ocean of Wisdom, his name, Tashijacho, means the ocean of wisdom. Tashi Deleg, that's a Tibetan greetings of the heart. I wish to bring to your attention what I feel is of utmost importance in overcoming a grave misconception among practitioners and leaders of the world's religions in relation to Tibetan Buddhism. What arises from the statement of Buddhist thought that, quote, we don't believe in a God, we are non-theistic, has led to the misunderstanding that Buddhists, being only atheists, only believe in goodness and kindness, but don't have a higher reality. Shakusoyen, who is Murshid Sam's grand Zen master, a Rinzai Zen abbot, was the first Buddhist teacher to come to the Western world for the Parliament of World Religions in Chicago in 1896. In one of his sermons called The God Conception in Buddhism, he addresses the same misconception. He says, at the outset, let me state that Buddhism is not atheistic as the term is conventionally understood. It has certainly a God, the highest reality and truth through which and in which this universe exists. So now I say I'm a Sufi disciple and Sufi spiritual director of a small worldwide Sufi lineage known as the Sufi Ruhaniyat International, tracing through Hazrat Inayat Khan and my teacher, Murshid Samuel Lewis. Further, I'm the disciple of the Vajrayana master, the 12th Taisittu Rinpoche. My first living contact with you was in 1976. Living in Dharamsala, my family and I had the good fortune of having an interview with you. let's see. I'm just going to skip ahead. Here. Naturally, the highest standard for mystics is direct experience with no need of concepts. Without direct experience, and because of the limitations of language, it is common that practitioners of religions may not understand the main principles that even their own founders did their best to elucidate. So the principle here, I think, is important to understand is that if I have a mystical experience, there's no language that can describe that. And so I use metaphor. And if you haven't had that experience, then you can only understand the metaphor in terms of your own experience. And so many of the scriptures that have been translated at the limitation of the translator's experience, because they didn't understand what the beings who had that experience were writing. So it says, for example, in the Quran, one of the main surahs, the Unity Surah, says, say Allah is one of which there is nothing independent, never taking birth, never dying. All is Allah, and Allah is all. And in the main sacred phrase in Islam is La ilaha illallah, loosely translated as nothing exists but God. Shakusoyan skillfully equates samatha or shamatha, the gate of sameness, with the God reality, and proceeds to show that from this perspective, we are in God and God is in us. My response to these illuminating teachings is to understand them as elegant definitions of God, even though they stem from a non-theistic point of view. I certainly understand that most Western religious teachers invoke God as the creator. If they were attentive to the teachings of their prophets, they would realize that continuous creation is ongoing activity of the essence without limiting the essence to that one quality. For example, in Islam, the divine is described as Zat and Sifat. Zat referring to the essence, the silent life, and Sifat to the qualities. I'm going to skip ahead. Too many words.
Skip to the essence, because I think our people are wanting.
Okay, here we go. Your Holiness, through the blessings of your realization, your genuine kindness and compassion, you have become a vehicle for happiness for all sentient beings. We are ever moved by the effect of your awakening on all who come in contact you. And still, we experience people's confusion in relation to non-theism. So it was a request to His Holiness to redescribe what the Buddhist tradition really means and to put it in the right perspective. And so I'm sorry, I realized that was much longer than I thought it was when I started reading it. But
it's a key question, for many of us.
Each person, each prophet who has come has tried to relate oneness. Now, if there's one, do the math. There's not two. It's a simple equation. There's not you and me. And still, I'm not saying that to discount evolution and our presence where God manifests. But because of the thought of self, we're God confused. So yeah, sorry for the long letter.
No, thank you for that. And our mind can throw up all of these questions, but the essence is what we actually can experience for ourselves, and that's what this whole search for most people is about, is getting that experience, whether it's in a session in Buddhism or going to church on Sundays.
There's a few things I wanted to talk about, the dances, which I didn't get to, which I think.
Yeah, let's jump back to the dance, because we only have a few more minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just go a little over that time. But so the dances came through. They started to multiply. More and more people were doing them. We started to realize we needed to have a dance manual which would record the dances. And I remember doing that putting the first dance manual together on the floor of our living room at the Garden of Allah in Corte Madera. And then at a certain point, there was a realization that these dances were for the world, and if they had the tag of you had to be a Sufi to dance, that would be a limitation. And so we made a daughter organization called Center for the Dances of Universal Peace. And so that way, anyone who had a spiritual path could use these dances and spread them. And then we started training programs, and then you could become certified as a dance leader. And all of that was a unfolding development. And then we had books, and then we had CDs, and now we have an extraordinary website, the International Network for the Dances of Universal Peace. It has a library of 500-600 dances with instructions, with music, sometimes with video. And, so the method of training people, if you're a spiritual lineage, you recognize your relationship with the teacher, and the transmission and the living connection is so very important. So at first, when we started having these, becoming a certified dance leader, sometimes people would come, they'd do their 2-3 years, they get certified, and you never see them again. I mean, that was their prerogative. We never said anything else. But now we see this should be a living relationship with someone who's carrying the transmission of the dances. And so now we're trying to emphasize that more. There's dances. I think there are dance circles in 40 or 50 countries now active. And so when I say countries, in the US, there's hundreds and hundreds. And so there's I said the International Network. There's also Dances of Universal Peace North America, another website, and different parts of the world. The dancers are done in New Zealand and Australia, in Russia, in Germany, in France, in Spain, Italy, and in Latvia, in Estonia, in South America. So it's spread all over the world. At the same time, we feel these dances are for the world. So we don't have a sense of ownership, but we do have a sense of shepherding or nurturing, and to keep them at the highest quality we can. So that's our effort in providing guidance and providing instruction and so on. So it's not just learning how to lead something, but to awaken something within you, what the dances are for, what they do, they're experiential. And when you get together with a group of people and you hold hands, that in itself is extraordinary. Someone gave me a little child's birthday toy. It's a little glass tube with 2 little metal things in the middle. And if you were to hold the 2 ends, it would go, right? If there's an electric current passing through. So now if I've done the experiment where we've had a circle of 50 people. Okay. And then I put between my hand and the next person's hand, I put this little glass tube and it goes, doot. Now, if across the circle, 25 people on either side, if those people let go, the current stops. Doesn't go off. There's an amazing current that goes on. And then there's that devotion in the inner life that we're calling on. So it's an extraordinarily wonderful form. And it's a great way to prepare for meditation. And meditation is a great way to prepare for these dances. So I wanted to get those thoughts in there. And If you were to go, speaking to the people who are not familiar, if you go on YouTube, put on, Dances of Universal Peace, put in my name, many other people's, not just myself. There's hundreds and hundreds of videos of dances in different places. You can go on and look at, go to these two websites and many, many other resources too. So you can find some support for that.
Thank you, Shabda, for sharing that. And one of the objectives of the new movie Sunflower, because we captured the dances at their origins, but now with this new movie, I definitely want to go to South America. I definitely want to go to see the dances done in other countries, in Africa, perhaps, and Europe. So this is the focus. We want to show not just the dances, but we want to definitely show the spiritual energy that comes and the actual experiences of the leaders, of the new leaders, especially the young leaders in the world today, bringing out for the next generation.
Right.
I've got one more question. Maybe you want to answer something, but after that, we have one more question before we take questions from you in the audience. So be sure you put your questions down. Go ahead, Shabda. You want to say more before my last?
I just wanted to say, you talked about Colombia, and so I want the viewers to have the sense of beauty that I have about it. Is so as the dances spread, different ones of us would go to a certain area. So now one of my colleagues has been down there, but now I'm invited down to an eco village, I don't know, 15 years ago, whatever it was. No, it wasn't that long ago, 10 years ago for me, to an eco village in Colombia. And there's 200 people, 185 of them, 170, say 170 of them below 35 years old. Now, again, when I was with Sam, we were all below 30. But so it was very thrilling for me as someone who's now older to see the next generation and the next generation. And so there's so many rich pockets around the world where there's an upswelling of our next generation and our next generation and our next generation catching the perfume of the message and finding their way to practice it.
Yeah, that's obviously the future of the world is in the hands of the youth. And that sort of leads me into the next question. Our final thing we have time for today is what do you see as our responsibility as let's say individuals on the path, searching for our personal illumination, searching for our own connection with the highest ideal, whether we call it God or whatever we call it. But how do you see that what we can do or what we should do to deal with the larger issues in the world today, like environmental change, nuclear proliferation, conflicts, injustice, poverty? What can we as spiritual beings do to make a difference in this world?
Yeah. It's a great question that we should ask ourselves every day. What more can I do? How can I serve? So, just to bring Murshid Sam into the picture, he would say to us, it was a Vietnam War at the time, and he said to us, he says, I'd like to go to a peace demonstration where the demonstrators demonstrate peace. So, without question, from this moment forever, we want to work on purifying our heart, deconstructing our notion of a self, of selfishness, of manifesting loving kindness, compassion, embracing whatever's arising, making friends with what's arising, and doing our best. Now, that doesn't mean we should wait to act in the world while we're trying to get our act together. Because certainly we eat meals even while we're trying to get ourselves together. So, as I said earlier, our body is made out of planet Earth. We're part of it. Our body's 80, 90% water. So taking care of Mother Earth, it isn't quite right to say it that way. She's taking care of us, but we want to make a living relationship with everything in the natural world. And now there's such wonderful research about the way trees support each other and their roots. And there's a very funny cartoon where these two trees are talking. These two trees are talking to each other. And one says, "Do you think humans can communicate with each other?" The other tree says, "How could they? They don't have any roots." And the other tree says, "Yeah, that's a crazy idea." So the first step of us caring for the planet is making a living relationship with it. Then we have to find the ways that we have capacity to be a contributor. So my own approach, I've been a gardener all my adult life. I grow vegetables, grow food. I've planted many trees on the property I'm on. There isn't room for another tree. I have a relationship with those trees, even the ones that make scent. I can be in another country and they'll come to me. I'll go to them. So there's a living communication. I know that one of our problems is pollution from creating energy. So I have solar panels on our roof, so those are things that are simple things I could do. Certainly the power to vote. We should vote our way to protect the planet. There's no question there. And nuclear energy, I can't see it. It doesn't work for me. I feel like if I know about my own life, when I made a mistake and I didn't pay attention to the mistake, then the mistake happens, something happens again, a little bit larger to capture my attention, say, hey, you've got to change your ways here. And if I don't capture that, if I don't pay attention to that, something bigger happens and the portion keeps getting bigger to get my attention. So I think it's inevitable that as long as we have nuclear energy, we're going to have nuclear catastrophes. It's an opinion. It's just the way things are. Systems are good, but they're run by humans, which are fallible. Nuclear energy, nuclear weaponry it's a failed concept. Who would want to be responsible for obliterating the planet? And I shouldn't say that's not a fair way to say it. Obliterating the planet for it to be able to support human life. Because Mother Earth, she'll do fine. Her cycle is much longer than ours. She can recuperate quickly, but her ability to support life, especially human life, if it's dependent on us not completely mucking things up. So let's do our best.
So true. So true. And we'll have to leave it there because we have some questions that people want to take. But, I loved what you said, Pir Shabda. This is a question we should ask ourselves every day. And, and then every night, what did I get done today in order to be more of service, to really take some action, or at least to concentrate in myself, to be able to see the other not as the other, but as part of myself. So questions, let me see what we have from the I'll have to make it bigger here. And by the way, stay tuned, everyone, because we are going to have, after these questions, Pir Shabda is going to lead us in some practices of what we're going to discuss as remembrance. Okay, so
I see this first question. So
okay, can you read it?
I'll read it out loud. I think everybody sees it, but I'll read it aloud. If God had told Murshid Sam to minister to the old, sick, and dying, what would Murshid bring or say? Well, I mean, to the question, he'd do his best, but I do want to tell a story of Murshid that would give an indication of how he viewed the world. And so if you can imagine now, it's the late 60s. We're in his meeting room. It's quite small. There's probably 15, 20 people there. He's giving a lesson. Everybody present has a very sweet and genuine relationship, both to him and each other. And into the room walks a completely deranged person. Now, that wasn't that uncommon in the 60s. So the fellow, interrupts Murshid, and he says in a very kind of loud, strange voice, he says, God has appointed me to be your spiritual teacher, he says to Murshid Sam. Okay, now just think for a moment, what would you do? Okay, Murshid Sam, he stands up from his chair and immediately says, I accept on one condition. And the fellow says, well, what's that condition? And Murshid says, you show me one person in this room who God has not appointed to be my spiritual teacher. The fellow was stunned. He sat down and attended the class. So I've got to assume that whatever assignment Murshid was given, and I speak probably whatever assignment you were given, if you were given an assignment, you should do your best to serve and see God in everyone and serve them all as God.
Are there any other questions? Let's see. I think we... oh, yes. Was there a reply to the letter to His Holiness the Dalai Lama? I was going to actually ask you that same question. Did he ever change what he was saying about Islam?
Yes, he changed, but I never received a reply. And I went through good channels too, Robert Thurman, Professor Thurman, he helped. And so I also had a relationship with His Holiness Secretary. So I assume it got to him. And I can also assume that when you put something into the space, it got to his heart. I call it the coconut wireless, but I never did receive a Dear Shabda, love your holiness. So no, I didn't receive a reply, but I do feel that he has moderated his method. It makes no difference to me that I was a instigator or whatever you call it. In instigator is not the right word, but
facilitator.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, but thanks for the question. No response, not yet. Anyway,
I'm hoping that we will be able to get to the Dalai Lama as part of the personalities, it's the wrong word, of part of the masters that we will have in Sunflower. That's one of the reasons why we're out trying to get substantial financial help. Any other questions? Let's see. Okay, I guess we're ready to go on to the final part of our program, which is going to be some actual inner practices that we can do. Before we do that, I want to first of all talk to the friends at home that you can share this great talk we've had with Pir Shabda and Tamam by going to, it'll be on YouTube, it'll be on Facebook, but also our website at sunseed.org, /wisdom talks. You'll be able to see this talk and as at any time you want, and study some of the great words that Pir Shabda said. You can share it with friends. But most importantly, I want to ask you again to go to our website to help us make the new movie, the sequel movie, to see what happened to the people like Pir Shabda and many others who were brought up in the era of the 60s and who've given so much back to the world today, but also to talk to the new thought leaders, new and old, because I don't call the Dalai Lama new, but he's definitely people like the Dalai Lama. We'll see if we can get to him. I hope so, and other great people out there today. But with your help, please, sunflowerthefilm.com is where you can go and contribute to us to make this new project happen. So let's now, and one last thing, right? We have another Wisdom Talk a week from today. Very important. We have 2 world-changing guests, peacemakers working in the Holy Land, trying to bring together the Abrahamic religions, the Judaism, Christianity, Islam, working with leaders of all 3 religions who get together and talk about how we can have more unity in the world and still keep our own traditions separate, but opening up to the acceptance of each other, to stopping the brutal conflicts that exist because of people's ideas about the separateness of these religions. And so this is a gentleman named Shahabuddin David Less. He was actually a disciple of both Pir Khan and Murshid Sam Lewis. And this was one of Sam's initiatives to put out into the world to bring together the Abrahamic religion. So it's actually been happening for over 20 years. Shahabuddin's been working in the Holy Land and around the world, and he's going to be with us next Sunday, which is going the 14th of November. It will be right here on sunseed.org /wisdom talks. You can go there now and pre-register because we have maybe some limitations on the tickets. It will start at 11 a.m. Pacific time a week from today. So please, if you're interested in and he's also Shahabuddin in Peace in the World. He'll be talking.
Who's he going to be joined with?
You know, I don't have his name in front of me, unfortunately, but he's going to be joined with the international director of the Abrahamic.
Maybe Hassan Manasri.
Thank you so much for filling in for my mistake. Okay, yes, Hassan Manasri will be there, and also we're going to have some pre-recorded, because it'll be direct from the Holy Land, so the time is different. Some noted rabbi and some noted representative from the Christian faith as well. So we will blend all that together with the wisdom of Shahabuddin and his meditations, his practices next Sunday. So now I'm going to turn it back to you, Pir Shabda. Lead us in something to help us remember. Now, that was going to be one of my questions of what is remembrance then in terms of the duality and the non-duality, but practice is probably better than intellectual talk, so I will zip it out and follow you.
Remember, put things back together. I remember my Tibetan master, Taisita Rinpoche, saying, he says, I don't like the word reincarnation. He says, Tuesday is not a reincarnation of Monday. It's a continuity. So in that way, and I'll tell one more story about my teacher, a personal one. I went for my first interview with Murshid Samuel Lewis. I made an appointment. He was at his home in Novato called the Garden of Inayat. I hitchhiked up there. I knocked on the door very cordially. He answered the door. He welcomed me, asked me how I was. He says, come into my office and sit down. And we sat down together, and he asked me, so why did you come to see me? And I said, well, Murshid, I don't really have any questions. I just felt I should come to see you. So he stood up. He says, well, then thank you very much for coming. And he walked out. And that was it. So from then on, I'm learning how to get in touch with my question. So I'd like to do a practice together that I think is suited for online together. It's very, very simple. It takes the words La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. So if you don't quite get the words, just keep smiling, make yourself look like you're having a good time, and do your best. Don't worry so much. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha, it means no, there is nothing exists that's separate. Illallah, everything. The language is wrong. You can't say everything. There's only one. So this is the way that when I practice with some Sufis in Syria, and nice to invoke the Holy Land of Syria that's been suffering so much. Some Naqshbandi Sufis use this little melody. It went like this. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. So listen, la ilaha illallah. So let's do our best just to sing it all together. You in your room, me in my room. Feel our hearts through the coconut wireless. And invoke nothing exists but that one essential, effulgent, all-wise, all love, all beauty, all in all. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah, 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 la ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Put your feeling into it. La ilaha illallah. 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 Call from the lover to the beloved. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah, 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 la ilaha illallah. Draw on your strength. Feel like an athlete. Come on. La ilaha illallah. And add your devotion. Illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Let the call be the answer. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, illallah, la ilaha 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 illallah. La ilaha illallah. He says, I've been forgetful for 60 years, but not for one single second has this flowing toward me ever stopped or slowed. He says, I belong to the beloved. The beloved is all in all. The lover is only a veil. If you're here, you're alive. Something in you is alive. It's a mystery. It's a mystery. Go into that mystery. Follow your breath into the heart. Awaken. And naturally, that awakening is for the benefit of all sentient beings in all realms. And so loving kindness and compassion, broadcasting and speaking to all the suffering. So it's what a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for this opportunity. May you all be beneficial. And may sunflower manifest for the world. I mean, thank you, Amartat, for everything you're doing.
Yeah, well, thank you, Shabda. He's been a constant. You have been a constant support for all this whole project. As Pir Shabda Kahn used to not like applause, he would always thank like this, right? So that's you can all raise your arms and thank Pir Shabda and Tamam for being with us. And I want to thank all of you, the audience, for being here with us. You are what makes the inspiration for all of us to come back and do more of these wisdom talks, to make more movies like Sunflower, which is our service to humanity. And so I'm going to wish you all good afternoon, good night, good morning, wherever you are in the world. May you be blessed. Namaste. Shalom Aleichem. Assalamu alaikum. Ram, Ram, Jai Ram, Om. May the long time sun seed shine upon you.